If the black wolf ever looks you in the eyes, the hunters warned, don't run, because it already decided whether you live or die. Snow drifted through the crooked rooftops of Black Hollow like ash from a dying fire, covering the narrow streets in pale silence, while the rest of the pack gathered inside the feast hall, where laughter and music spilled into the frozen night. Elena Whitmore stood behind the kitchen with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, the cold biting through her thin gray coat as she waited for the cooks to finish throwing away what little food remained from the winter festival. The smell of roasted meat still lingered in the air, rich and warm, but none of it belonged to her. It never did. Don't touch anything before the alphas are done, one of the servants snapped as he carried a tray past her. Unless you want another week cleaning ash bins. Elena lowered her eyes immediately. Yes, sir. She had learned years ago that silence kept people kinder, or at least quicker to forget she existed. Around her, the kingdom celebrated the return of hunting season after the worst winter in nearly a decade. But beyond the torchlight, beyond the village walls, something else waited in the woods. Something people only whispered about after dark. 3 hunters had vanished near Hollow Creek in the last month. Livestock had disappeared from farms without leaving tracks. And every story ended the same way. A massive black wolf with gold eyes watching from the trees. The pack called it a monster. Elena wasn't sure why that made her feel sorry for it. The kitchen door burst open behind her, making her flinch. A cook tossed a small cloth bundle into the snow. Trash run, he muttered before disappearing back inside. Elena waited until the door shut again before kneeling quickly beside the bundle. Inside were 2 stale dinner rolls, a bruised apple, and scraps of dried meat too burned for the guests to eat. Her stomach twisted painfully at the smell. She hadn't eaten since sunrise. For a moment, she almost kept the food for herself. Almost. Then she looked toward the dark forest stretching beyond the village fence, silent beneath the falling snow. You're probably hungry too, she whispered softly. The walk to the old gallows took nearly 20 minutes through knee-deep snow and bitter wind that stung her cheeks raw. Most wolves avoided this side of the woods after sunset. The trees here stood too still, too quiet. Elena tightened her grip on the bundle as she stepped over frozen roots and broken branches until the ruined hanging post finally emerged through the fog ahead like the bones of something ancient. That was when she heard it. A low growl. Not loud. Weak. Exhausted. Her breath caught instantly. Between the shadows beneath the gallows, a massive black wolf lay curled against the frozen ground, one silver chain wrapped around its back leg and disappearing into an old iron stake buried beneath the snow. Up close, the creature looked even larger than the stories claimed. Its fur was dark as midnight, thick with frost, and one golden eye slowly lifted toward her. Elena stopped breathing. Every instinct told her to run. The wolf's stare felt ancient somehow, heavy and sharp enough to cut straight through her fear. But then she noticed its ribs beneath the fur, the trembling in its breathing, the exhaustion in those terrifying eyes. And suddenly it didn't look like a monster anymore. It looked alone. Elena slowly crouched into the snow and unwrapped the cloth bundle with shaking fingers. I know what that feels like, she whispered. The wolf's ears twitched. Carefully, trying not to panic, she placed one stale dinner roll onto the snow between them and stepped back. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Wind howled softly through the dead trees overhead while snowflakes melted against Elena's eyelashes. Then, slowly, impossibly, the great black wolf lowered its head toward the bread. The chain rattled once against the frozen ground. And for the first time in weeks, Elena Whitmore watched something dangerous choose not to bite. You should be afraid of me, the voice whispered inside her mind. But you keep coming back anyway. Elena nearly dropped the lantern. The sound had not come from the trees around her. It had come from inside her head, low and rough like distant thunder rolling through the mountains. Snow crunched softly beneath her boots as she froze beside the old gallows, her breath clouding into the freezing air while the massive black wolf watched her from the shadows beneath the dead pine branches. For 3 nights, she had returned to the forest carrying scraps stolen from the kitchens. 3 nights of sneaking through the village after midnight, while everyone else slept beside warm fireplaces and heavy doors locked against the winter cold. And every single night, the wolf had been waiting for her. Elena swallowed hard and slowly lowered the lantern onto the snow. I am imagining things, she whispered nervously. The wolf blinked once. Golden eyes reflected the lantern light, like molten metal in the darkness. The silver chain around its leg rattled softly as it shifted closer, though this time the movement felt weaker than before. Elena noticed fresh snow clinging to its fur and a strange stiffness in the way it carried itself. Something was wrong. Again. Carefully, she crouched several feet away and unwrapped the cloth bundle in her lap. Tonight she had managed to bring a small piece of roasted chicken and half a biscuit hidden beneath her coat. Her stomach growled painfully at the smell, but she ignored it. I almost got caught for this, she murmured softly while placing the food down. Mrs. Harper counted the meat trays twice tonight. The wolf lowered its head but did not eat immediately. Instead, it kept watching her with unsettling focus, as if memorizing every expression on her face. Elena tried not to look directly into its eyes for too long. There was too much intelligence there, too much understanding. It did not feel like sitting beside an animal. It felt like sitting beside someone pretending to be one. Wind swept through the trees overhead, carrying distant laughter from the village far below the hill. Elena pulled her coat tighter around herself. They are holding another hunt tomorrow, she said quietly. They think you are killing livestock near the river. The wolf's ears flattened slightly. I told them maybe the storm drove animals closer to town, but nobody listens to an Omega servant. Her voice softened at the last words, nearly disappearing beneath the wind. Nobody really sees me at all. Silence settled between them. Cold, heavy, familiar. Then slowly, impossibly, the wolf nudged the piece of chicken back toward her with its nose. Elena stared in confusion. What? The wolf huffed softly. She laughed before she could stop herself, the sound small and startled in the middle of the empty forest. You are giving it back? The creature remained still, watching her carefully. Elena's chest tightened unexpectedly. Nobody had shared food with her in years. Not since her mother died during the fever outbreak 5 winters ago. She hesitated before finally tearing the chicken in half. Fine, she whispered. But only because you look stubborn. The wolf ate quietly this time. No growling, no snapping. Only the soft crunch of snow beneath its weight and the distant howl of wind moving through dead branches. Elena found herself relaxing beside it in ways that should have terrified her. She should have run. Any normal person would have run. But there was something lonely about the creature beneath the gallows. Something wounded beyond the silver chain cutting into its leg. As the lantern flickered lower, Elena slowly reached toward the chain buried in the snow. The moment her fingers brushed the freezing silver, the wolf jerked violently backward with a sharp sound of pain. Elena gasped. I am sorry. I am sorry. The wolf's breathing grew heavier, but after several tense seconds, it stopped retreating. Carefully, Elena noticed strange dark markings burned into the silver links themselves, symbols she did not recognize curling across the metal like scars. Her stomach twisted uneasily. Those were not hunting restraints. Those looked older. Worse. Who did this to you? She whispered. The wolf lowered its massive head slowly until its forehead rested inches from her knee. And for one impossible second, Elena felt something brush against her thoughts again, softer this time, exhausted and broken beneath the roughness of the voice. Run before they find me. Even monsters remember kindness, Grandmother Mira once told her. That is what makes them dangerous. The next morning, the village woke to panic. Elena barely had time to set down a basket of laundry before shouting erupted outside the feast hall. Boots pounded across the frozen streets while pack hunters gathered near the center square with rifles slung across their backs and silver traps stacked in the snow beside them. Elena stopped near the well, her pulse quickening immediately. Tracks near Hollow Creek, someone shouted. Big ones. It killed another deer overnight. Alpha Darius wants every trail searched before sunset. Elena's stomach twisted hard. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and kept walking with her head down, hoping nobody noticed the sudden fear on her face. But fear had a scent among wolves, and Darius Hale noticed everything. Well, his voice drawled behind her, smooth and cruel. Look who suddenly looks nervous. Elena froze. Darius leaned casually against the wooden post outside the armory, tall and broad beneath his dark winter coat, silver rings glinting against his gloves as snow drifted through his dark hair. Every woman in Black Hollow admired him. Every servant feared him. I asked you a question, Elena. She forced herself to look up slightly. I am late for the wash house. And I am late for my hunt. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Funny thing about predators. They always hide near weak little things first. Elena's fingers tightened painfully around the basket handle. I do not know anything about the wolf. Darius smiled slowly. I never said wolf. Heat rushed to her face instantly. His eyes sharpened. Interesting. Elena turned immediately, trying to walk away, but his hand caught her arm hard enough to stop her in place. Careful, he murmured. You are shaking. Around them, villagers moved quickly through the snow, pretending not to notice. Nobody stepped in. Nobody ever did. Elena tried to pull free. Please let go. Or what? Darius tilted his head slightly. You going to run crying into the woods again? Her breath caught. I have seen you disappear every night this week. Ice flooded through her chest. He leaned closer. So either you have finally found someone desperate enough to sneak around with you, his smile darkened faintly, or you are hiding something. Elena's heartbeat thundered painfully in her ears. She could not let him follow her into those woods. Could not let anyone find the wolf chained beneath the gallows. I am not hiding anything. Then prove it. His grip tightened slightly as he pointed toward the hunting party gathering nearby. Come with us tonight. Elena stared at him in horror. What? If you are innocent, help us track the beast. Snow drifted quietly between them while fear crawled up Elena's spine like ice water. She knew exactly what would happen if the hunters found the wolf weakened and trapped. Something inside her chest twisted painfully at the thought. I cannot, she whispered. Darius smiled again, slow and satisfied this time. That is what I thought. Before Elena could answer, a sudden sound rolled across the square from somewhere beyond the village walls. A deep growl. Low. Thunderous. Every wolf in the square went completely still. The sound echoed through the frozen air with enough force to silence the entire street. Elena's breath caught instantly because she recognized it. Not anger. Warning. Darius released her arm at once, his expression hardening. Get the rifles, one hunter barked. It is close. Villagers rushed indoors while snow swirled violently through the streets. Elena's pulse pounded harder with every second. The wolf had never come this near the village before. Never. Another growl rolled through the forest line beyond the gates, deeper this time, carrying something raw and furious beneath it. Darius stared toward the trees with narrowed eyes. Finally, but Elena felt something else beneath the sound. Pain, panic, fear, and then suddenly, sharp enough to make her knees nearly buckle, she heard the voice inside her head again. Do not let them chain me again. The most dangerous cages are the ones built from fear. Elena could still hear the growl echoing through Black Hollow long after the streets emptied. Doors slammed shut across the village while hunters rushed toward the eastern woods carrying lanterns and silver traps through the falling snow. Somewhere beyond the trees, the wolf was running frightened. Enough to reveal itself this close to the village. And somehow Elena knew it was because of her. She stood frozen outside the armory until Darius grabbed a rifle from one of the hunters and glanced back toward her. Go home, Omega. Then he disappeared into the storm with the others. Elena waited exactly 10 seconds before turning and running in the opposite direction. Snow whipped against her face as she pushed through the narrow trail, leading uphill toward the old gallows. Her lungs burned painfully in the freezing air, but she did not slow down. Branches clawed at her coat, while the wind howled louder through the dead pines overhead. Please still be there, she whispered breathlessly. Please. Another growl rolled through the forest ahead. Closer this time. Weaker. Elena stumbled over a frozen root before catching herself against a tree trunk. Her pulse hammered harder when she noticed fresh tracks cutting through the snow. Large wolf tracks. Deep. Uneven. One trail dragged slightly behind the others. Injured. Fear twisted sharply through her chest. She followed the tracks faster until the ruined gallows finally appeared through the blizzard haze. The sight waiting there nearly stopped her heart. The silver chain beneath the post had snapped loose from the iron stake. Snow around it was torn apart with massive paw prints and long drag marks disappearing deeper into the woods. Elena's stomach dropped. No, she spun desperately, searching the darkness between the trees. Where are you? For one terrible moment, silence answered her. Then she heard it. Heavy breathing somewhere behind the ridge. Elena rushed toward the sound, slipping through waist-high snowdrifts until she reached a narrow clearing hidden between stone cliffs. The black wolf lay collapsed beside the rocks, its thick fur dusted white with snow, while one side of its body trembled violently from exhaustion. Elena's breath caught painfully at the sight of fresh blood staining the silver chain still wrapped around its leg. Oh my God! The wolf lifted its head weakly when she approached, golden eyes unfocused beneath the storm. But the moment she knelt beside it, the growling stopped. Its breathing eased slightly. Elena carefully reached toward the silver restraint again, slower this time. The metal looked wrong up close. Dark symbols carved across the links pulsed faintly beneath the snow like embers trapped beneath ash. Every instinct in her body screamed not to touch it. But then she looked at the wolf shaking against the frozen rocks and ignored the fear anyway. "This is going to hurt," she whispered softly. The wolf's eyes remained fixed on her face. Elena wrapped both hands around the chain and pulled. Pain exploded through her palms instantly, hot and sharp enough to make her gasp aloud. The symbols burned bright beneath her fingers, as if the silver itself hated her touch. But slowly, inch by inch, the broken restraint loosened from the wolf's leg. The creature trembled harder, a low sound rumbling deep in its chest, not threatening this time, but strained. Elena bit down hard against the pain and pulled again. The final link snapped free. For one breathless second, everything went still. Then warmth rushed suddenly through Elena's hands, strange and bright beneath her skin like sunlight spreading through frozen veins. The wolf jerked backward sharply, golden eyes widening as it stared at her glowing palms. Elena stared too, panic flooding her chest. What is happening? Snow swirled violently around the clearing as the strange warmth spread farther up her arms. The wolf slowly pushed itself upright despite its exhaustion, towering over her now with frost-covered fur gleaming beneath the storm. But instead of fear, something else filled those ancient golden eyes as they locked onto hers. Recognition. And deep inside her mind, clearer than ever before, the voice returned. "You should not exist. Some truths are buried for a reason," the voice murmured inside her mind. "And some bonds were never meant to awaken again." Elena stumbled backward through the snow, staring at the strange light fading slowly from her hands while icy wind tore through the hidden clearing around them. The black wolf remained perfectly still beside the rocks, towering and silent now that the silver restraint had fallen away from its leg. Snowflakes melted against its dark fur before they could settle, hissing softly against the unnatural heat radiating from its body. Elena's pulse hammered painfully in her chest. "What are you?" she whispered. The wolf's golden eyes never left her face. Then suddenly the creature flinched violently, its entire body tightening, as though some invisible force had slammed into it. A deep growl rumbled through the clearing, rough with pain. Elena took an instinctive step forward. "Hey!" The wolf staggered sideways into the rocks, claws scraping hard against stone while its breathing grew ragged and uneven. Snow swirled faster around them now, twisting through the trees like pale ghosts beneath the moonlight. Another painful sound escaped the creature's throat. Elena's fear vanished instantly beneath concern. "You are hurt." She moved closer before she could think better of it. The wolf lowered its massive head sharply, baring its teeth for the first time since she met it. Not threatening. Warning. Do not come closer. The voice crashed through her mind stronger than ever before, deeper and rougher now, strained beneath exhaustion. Elena froze. "You can speak. Not for much longer." The wolf's body trembled violently again. Elena noticed strange dark veins pulsing beneath the fur along its neck, glowing faintly beneath the storm shadows like cracks spreading through black ice. Something about them felt wrong. Ancient. Dangerous. "You need help." A low, bitter sound rumbled from the wolf's chest, almost like laughter. "You already helped me more than you understand." Then suddenly the creature collapsed hard against the snow. Elena gasped and rushed forward instinctively this time, dropping to her knees beside the massive wolf despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. The moment her hands touched its fur again, warmth surged sharply through her palms. The strange glowing light returned instantly beneath her skin. The wolf jerked beneath her touch, breathing harder now. "No," the voice growled inside her head. "Stop." But Elena could feel something broken beneath the creature's skin. Not bones. Something deeper. Something cold and poisoned spreading through it like rot beneath frozen earth. Without thinking, she pressed both hands against the wolf's side. Light spilled brighter between her fingers. Wind exploded through the clearing. The wolf let out a sharp sound of pain as the darkness beneath its fur flickered violently. Elena's eyes widened in panic. I am sorry. I do not know how to stop it. But the warmth kept flowing anyway, pouring from her chest into the creature beneath her hands. Images flashed suddenly through her mind, so quickly they stole her breath away. A massive throne carved from black stone. Silver eyes glowing beneath a crown of iron. Fire consuming an ancient battlefield beneath a blood-red moon. And a voice whispering one name over and over again. Lucian. Elena gasped sharply as the visions vanished. The wolf's breathing slowed beneath her hands. Then, slowly, impossibly, its massive body began to change. Elena stumbled backward through the snow in horror as black fur receded like smoke beneath moonlight. Bones shifted beneath skin. The enormous wolf form shrank violently against the frozen ground while silver light flickered through the storm around them. Elena covered her mouth in shock. Seconds later, a man collapsed where the wolf had been. Tall, barely conscious. Dark hair damp with melting snow falling across sharp features far too striking to belong in a forgotten village like Black Hollow. Strange dark markings curled faintly beneath the skin along his throat before fading slowly into nothing. Elena could not breathe. The man's silver eyes opened weakly beneath the storm. Ancient eyes. Familiar eyes. The same ones that had watched her from beneath the gallows every night. He looked at her like he had crossed through death itself, just to see her face one more time. Then his voice finally reached her aloud for the first time, rough and exhausted beneath the wind. You came back. The moon does not make mistakes when it ties two souls together. Elena could not move. Snow drifted silently around the stranger lying against the frozen ground, while her heartbeat thundered so loudly she barely heard the storm anymore. The man before her looked nothing like the monster Black Hollow feared. He looked dangerous, yes. Powerful in a way that made the cold air itself seem heavier around him. But there was exhaustion in his silver eyes now, and something else she did not understand every time he looked at her. It felt less like he was seeing a stranger and more like someone finally finding his way home. Elena forced herself to breathe. You were the wolf. His gaze stayed fixed on her face. Most days, the answer sent another wave of disbelief through her chest. She should have been terrified. Any normal person would have run screaming back to the village. Instead, Elena found herself kneeling closer beside him as snow settled across his dark hair and bare shoulders. You are freezing. Cold does not hurt me anymore. His voice sounded rougher spoken aloud than inside her mind, deep enough to vibrate through the storm itself. Elena glanced nervously toward the forest around them. The hunters are searching for you. I know. Then why are you still here? For the first time, something shifted faintly in his expression. Not amusement exactly. Something quieter. Because you came back. Elena's chest tightened painfully at the words. She quickly looked away, pulling her thin coat from her shoulders and holding it toward him instead. Here. He stared at the coat without taking it. You will freeze. I would rather freeze than explain to the village why I left a dying man in the woods. A faint breath escaped him almost like a laugh before he finally accepted the coat and draped it loosely over himself. Even weakened, he carried an unnatural presence that made the snowy clearing feel too small around him. Elena noticed it now in the way the storm bent strangely around his body, the way the air seemed warmer near him despite the freezing wind. Nothing about him felt ordinary. What happened to you? She asked softly. Silence lingered for several seconds before he answered. Someone tried to turn me into a weapon. Elena frowned slightly. Those chains, his jaw tightened instantly, were made to control wolves stronger than ordinary silver can hold. The strange dark markings from the restraint flashed through her memory again. Who would make something like that? His silver. Eyes darkened faintly beneath the storm. Someone afraid of what I become when I lose control. Elena studied him carefully now. The scars beneath his skin. The exhaustion in his breathing. The loneliness buried beneath every word he spoke. Suddenly the stories about a monster in the woods felt smaller somehow. Simpler than the truth standing in front of her. You warned me to run, she whispered. Why? His gaze met hers fully then. Sharp. Ancient. Heavy enough to stop her breathing for one dangerous second. Because every person who stayed near me eventually paid for it. Wind swept hard through the clearing as distant voices echoed faintly somewhere deeper in the forest. Hunters. Getting closer. Elena's pulse jumped instantly. He heard them too. His expression hardened at once, while something darker flickered behind his silver eyes. You need to leave. Not without you. Elena. Hearing her name in his voice sent unexpected warmth rushing through her chest. If they find me like this, your pack will not survive what follows. Fear crawled coldly up her spine. Who are you? The storm seemed to still around them. Even the wind quieted for one strange breath, while the man slowly pushed himself upright despite the exhaustion weighing on him. Snow clung to his dark hair as his silver eyes locked onto hers again with terrifying intensity. My name, he said quietly, is Lucien Blackthorn. Elena's blood turned cold instantly. Every child in the Northern Territories knew that name. The Winter King. The Alpha King who ruled all 7 packs beyond the mountains. The monster powerful enough to end wars with a single command. The king who vanished 12 days ago without a trace. Elena stared at him in horror while the truth crashed through her all at once. She had not been feeding a starving wolf in secret. She had been hiding the most feared man in the kingdom. Kings do not kneel for mercy, Grandmother Mira used to say, but they will kneel for the one soul they cannot survive without. Elena could barely feel the cold anymore. Lucien Blackthorn. The name echoed through her mind while the storm raged around the hidden clearing, swallowing the distant voices of hunters somewhere beyond the ridge. Every story she had ever heard about the Alpha King crashed together at once. Ruthless, unbreakable, cursed. A ruler powerful enough to command every pack across the Northern Territories with a single glance. And somehow, impossibly, he was standing in front of her half-frozen and exhausted beneath her worn gray coat. Lucien's silver eyes never left the tree line. They're getting closer. Elena forced herself to speak through the shock tightening her chest. Your people are searching for you too. Not all of them want me found. Something dark flickered across his expression before disappearing again. Elena remembered the chains. The symbols burned into silver. The fear in his voice whenever he spoke about losing control. Suddenly his disappearance no longer sounded like an accident. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the rocks. Both of them turned instantly. Lucien stepped in front of Elena without hesitation despite the weakness still visible in the tension of his body. Snow swirled hard through the clearing, while torchlight flickered faintly between the distant trees below. Hunters. Too close now. Elena's pulse jumped. You cannot fight them like this. I know. Another voice echoed through the storm. Tracks over here. Darius. Elena's stomach dropped instantly. Lucien noticed the fear on her face at once. Who was that? Darius Hale. Her voice lowered nervously. He leads most of the hunters in Black Hollow. Lucien's expression hardened slightly. The one who grabbed your arm in the square. Elena blinked in surprise. You saw that? I smelled your fear from half a mile away. Heat rushed unexpectedly into her face despite the freezing wind. Before she could answer, another lantern glow appeared through the trees. Much closer this time. Lucien straightened slowly beside her, every movement deliberate despite the exhaustion weighing on him. Something terrifying shifted in the air around him then. The storm itself seemed to bend away from him instinctively. Elena suddenly understood why entire kingdoms feared the man standing beside her. Even weakened, he felt less like a person and more like a force of nature barely holding itself together. Stay behind me, he said quietly. No, Lucien looked at her sharply. Elena's heart pounded hard enough to hurt, but she forced herself to stand her ground anyway. If they find you here alone, they will know someone helped you. Elena, I already made my choice when I came back. For one dangerous second, something unreadable flashed across his face. Then the sound of approaching boots shattered the moment apart. There, Darius emerged first through the trees holding a lantern high beside 2 armed hunters. The moment the light reached the clearing, all 3 men froze. Silence crashed down instantly. Darius stared directly at Lucien standing in the snow beside Elena. Confusion crossed his face first, then disbelief, then fear. Because even covered in frost and exhaustion, there was no mistaking the man before him now. Lucien Blackthorn did not need a crown to look like a king. The hunters dropped instantly to one knee. Darius remained standing several seconds longer before slowly lowering himself too, pale beneath the lantern light. "Your Majesty," one hunter whispered shakily. Snow drifted silently through the clearing, while Lucian's silver gaze locked onto Darius with enough cold authority to make the entire forest feel still. "You hunted me," Lucian said quietly. "We believed you were the beast attacking the village," Darius answered carefully without looking up. "And yet," Lucian replied, "the only thing I found in your village worth protecting was her." Every eye turned toward Elena instantly. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. Darius looked up sharply, confusion flashing across his face as Lucian stepped toward her through the snow. Elena's pulse thundered when he stopped directly in front of her. The storm seemed to disappear beneath the weight of his silver eyes. Then, before the hunters, before the village men who once ignored her existence, before the frozen woods themselves, the Alpha King lowered himself onto one knee in the snow. Gasps broke through the clearing. Lucian reached for Elena's trembling hand carefully, almost reverently, and pressed it against his chest above the steady thunder of his heartbeat. "She fed her king," he said softly, when the rest of the world left him to starve. The moon only reveals a true bond when both souls have already chosen each other. Elena could not breathe. Snow drifted silently through the clearing while Lucian Blackthorn remained kneeling before her, his hand wrapped gently around hers, as though she were something fragile and precious instead of the forgotten Omega, servant nobody in Black Hollow had noticed for years. Around them, the hunters stared in complete disbelief. Darius looked the worst. His face had gone pale beneath the lantern light, confusion and humiliation twisting together in his expression as he watched the Alpha King touch Elena like she mattered. Lucian rose slowly to his feet, never releasing her hand. The movement alone changed the air around them again. The exhaustion was still there. The storm-dark shadows beneath his eyes remained. But now that the truth was exposed, there was no hiding what he truly was. Power radiated from him naturally, cold and immense enough to make the hunters lower their gazes instinctively. "Your Majesty," Darius said carefully, struggling to recover his composure. "We did not know the creature was you." Lucian's silver eyes shifted toward him. "Creature." One single word. Quiet. Controlled. But the entire clearing seemed to freeze around it. Darius swallowed hard. "That was not my meaning." "No." Lucian stepped forward once, and suddenly every hunter in the clearing stiffened. "You hunted me through your territory for days." Snow crunched softly beneath his boots. "You placed silver traps across your forests." Another step. "And you chained me beneath an execution post, while I could barely hold my human form together." Elena's eyes widened sharply. Darius looked horrified. "We never chained you." Lucian went still. The storm howled louder around them. "What did you say?" Darius shook his head immediately. "We tracked signs of the beast. Yes, but nobody from Black Hollow placed those restraints." Elena felt the shift in Lucian instantly. Not fear. Something colder. More dangerous. His jaw tightened as if pieces of something terrible were suddenly falling into place inside. His mind. The chains had not come from the village. Someone else had captured the Alpha King before he ever reached Black Hollow. Someone powerful enough to forge cursed silver restraints. Lucian's gaze darkened faintly toward the storm beyond the trees. "Then they are closer than I thought." Elena looked up at him nervously. "Who?" Before he could answer, another sound echoed through the forest below. Horses. Dozens of them. The hunters turned sharply toward the ridge as torchlight suddenly appeared beyond the trees, brighter and larger than any village patrol. Elena's pulse jumped. Riders emerged through the snow moments later wearing black armor marked with the silver crest of the royal wolf. The King's Guard. They stopped instantly the moment they saw Lucian standing in the clearing. Every single rider dismounted at once and dropped to one knee in the snow. "Your Majesty." Their commander breathed in visible relief. Lucian nodded once, but did not release Elena's hand. The commander's eyes shifted toward her briefly before widening slightly in confusion. Not because she stood beside the king. Because of the scent in the air between them. Elena noticed it too now. Something warm and unfamiliar wrapping around her senses whenever Lucian stood close. Pine smoke. Winter frost. Wild storm air before snowfall. The commander lowered his gaze immediately. "The palace feared the worst after your disappearance." "Someone wanted the worst," Lucian replied quietly. "Prepare the horses. We leave tonight." The commander hesitated slightly before speaking again. And the girl, sire? Silence filled the clearing. Elena's chest tightened instantly. She knew this was the moment reality returned. Kings did not bring servant girls back to royal palaces. Men like Lucien Blackthorn belonged to crowns and wars and legends. Not lonely omegas who stole scraps from kitchens. She slowly pulled her hand away first. You do not owe me anything, she said softly. I only wanted to help. Lucien looked down at her then with an expression so intense it stole the warmth from her lungs. Elena. Her name sounded different in his voice now. Not accidental. Not temporary. Chosen. Snow swirled between them while the royal guards watched in complete silence. Then Lucien Blackthorn, ruler of the Northern Territories, reached up slowly and brushed his knuckles against her cheek with impossible gentleness. You are the first person, he said quietly, who ever looked at the monster and still came closer. The people who survive the coldest winters are never the strongest. They are the ones who still know how to love. Dawn rose slowly over the Northern Territories, turning the endless snowfields silver beneath the first light of morning as Black Hollow disappeared behind them. Elena sat quietly atop one of the royal horses wrapped in a heavy fur cloak borrowed from the king's guard, her hands still trembling slightly from everything that had happened during the night. Across the frozen road ahead, Lucien Blackthorn rode at the front of the procession beneath a sky the color of pale steel. Even surrounded by armed guards, he somehow looked alone, powerful, untouchable. But every few minutes, his silver eyes drifted back toward her as though he needed to make sure she was still there. Elena did not understand why that made warmth spread through her chest stronger than the cloak around her shoulders. The journey to the capital took 2 days through mountains buried beneath deep winter snow. Villages stopped and bowed when Lucien passed. Entire patrols lowered their heads without question the moment they recognized the black wolf crest stitched into his coat. Elena spent most of the ride silent, overwhelmed by the realization that the starving creature she fed beneath the gallows was the same man entire kingdoms feared speaking against. Yet somehow, the farther they traveled, the less afraid she became of him. At night, when the royal campfires crackled beneath the stars, Lucien always sat near enough for her to feel the quiet warmth of his presence even when neither of them spoke. On the third evening, the towers of Blackthorn's citadel finally appeared through the snowfall, enormous and ancient against the cliffs above the frozen river. Elena stared in speechless wonder at the massive fortress carved directly into the mountain itself. Torchlight burned across hundreds of windows while silver banners snapped violently in the winter wind high above the gates. This was not a place meant for girls like her. She felt it immediately. Servants rushed through marble halls polished like mirrors. Noble families gathered beneath crystal chandeliers, wearing jewels worth more than everything Elena had owned in her entire life. And the moment they saw her walking beside Lucien, the whispers began. That is the Omega? The servant girl? Impossible. Elena lowered her gaze instinctively as they passed through the great hall, but Lucien slowed beside her. Do not bow your head for them. His voice remained calm, but the command beneath it was unmistakable. They should be bowing to you. Elena looked up at him in shock. Before she could answer, an older nobleman stepped directly into their path. Your Majesty, he said carefully, though disapproval sharpened every word. The council has concerns regarding the girl. Lucien stopped moving. Silence spread instantly across the hall. What concerns? The nobleman hesitated beneath the weight of the Alpha King's silver stare. She is an unknown Omega from a forgotten village. The court expected. He glanced briefly toward Elena. Someone more suitable beside the throne. Elena felt humiliation burn through her chest immediately. Of course they did. Lucien, however, did not even look toward the councilman again. Instead, he turned fully toward Elena in the center of the crowded hall, while every noble watched in stunned silence. Do you know why the moon chooses mates? He asked softly. Elena blinked in confusion. No, Lucien stepped closer. Because power means nothing without someone capable of seeing the soul beneath it. His hand lifted slowly, brushing lightly against the side of her face exactly as he had done beneath the storm. The massive hall remained completely silent now. Hundreds of eyes watched them. But Lucien only looked at her. They saw a monster worth hunting, he murmured quietly. You saw someone worth saving. Emotion tightened painfully in Elena's throat. For her entire life, people looked through her as though she were invisible, weak, forgettable, unwanted. Yet somehow the most feared alpha in the kingdom looked at her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the world. Lucien's forehead rested gently against hers for one quiet breath before he finally spoke the words that changed everything. "You fed a starving wolf," he whispered, "but it was my soul that belonged to you from the very beginning."